Hello and welcome to Pieces in Action Verb podcast. This is we're recording interview number 20, or if you count the ones that we did in 2017, we're recording interview number 24. And this is Jenjen Wong. Welcome, Jenjen.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to. And so, how I know Jenjen? I met Jenjen at Kinetic Arts Center, but actually, Jenjen was the one that picked up the phone and said, "Hello, how can I help you?" when I called Kinetic Arts Center at age 39 and said, "I think you have dance classes, and what else do you do over there?" And so, Jenjen, you opened the door for me into one of the most, maybe perhaps the most exciting and silly and difficult and amazing adventures of my life by saying, yes, of course, it doesn't matter if you're clumsy. It doesn't matter if you're almost 40 years old. Yes, please come. Please come and try.
Oh, that's so awesome.
So,
And it makes me so happy to hear that you had such a positive experience.
yeah, so that's how I met you, and then you ended up being one of my dance teachers, and also sometimes sitting at the front desk when I remember the time I got to the top of the rope for the first time, and I was like, Jen, look at me. So that's my introduction for you, and I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself.
Well, circus, my name is Jenjen Wong, and circus has become a big part of my life as dance as well. Um, and what do I say about myself? The more formal way, I guess, is I'm originally from Southern California, but I moved up to the Bay Area and quickly found that this was much more of a place for me based on the creativity and the openness and the diversity and the adventure that suited my life and lifestyle better. So I've been up here in the Bay Area since, in Oakland specifically, since 2005.
Hmm.
And then circus came into my world in 2009, working at Kinetic Arts Center. And since then, it's been circus ever since.
Circus should
So
be its own piece verb, and we can get into
I feel
that.
that. Amend the list.
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah.
otherwise, let's see, dance and circus. And as you know, but other people might not know, I love gardening and bees and nature and all sorts of wonderful adventures and diversity for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I have this list. This is the list of piece verbs that I thought of when I thought of you, and I gosh, we could jump in anywhere. But first, I want to thank you for being warm. That is on the list. Definitely, your warmth was what got me in the door to the circus gym. And I would also like to start. Let's start with gardening, Jen Jen. So you and your husband are urban gardeners. And so, in terms of figuring that out, did you come to that already knowing how to garden, or did you two just say we want to do this? Let's figure out how we do this where we are.
Yeah, great question. I went to UC Davis. So that was my way out of Southern California via school. I actually studied business, but being at UC Davis, you learn how to grow things. And I took this amazing, like, introductory plant biology class
Hmm.
where we had like one 40-foot furrow of land, and every 5 feet we planted a different crop. And we learned about soil mixing. And it was like a 2-unit class that I think I had to take. And
For
I think I,
diversity in your
yeah, and I
credits,
think I think I was a senior at the time. So
right?
being a senior and everyone else was a freshman, we were broke and we're growing all this food of our own, and it was
Yeah,
just blowing our minds that we hadn't done that sooner because we lived in apartments and things like that, right? Well,
right.
now I lived in a small house and we had a backyard, and so we took what we were learning in our little plant biology class and started doing it at home
In UC Davis,
at UC Davis.
where
Yeah.
you lived with your friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it.
And so then when I moved away from Davis, many of the apartments in Oakland didn't have space. And then finally, my husband and I moved into the place we're at now,
Hmm.
which has a teeny tiny little patch of land in front of it. And I mean, teeny tiny, like maybe 300 square feet. It's not
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
big. And I was really excited about putting some veggie beds down. And so we did. And once we finally did, my husband said, "Wow, I've been wanting to do that all my life." And
Wow. And so there was this opportunity to,
totally.
yeah.
And he grew up in Mill Valley, so I don't know
Yeah.
why he wasn't growing things sooner, but it wasn't his way. He's a very engineering mind, and
He,
hadn't really gotten into the earthy stuff yet.
right, right. Also very good with his hands, yes? So
Yes,
does that come in handy when you're building raised
exactly.
beds and that sort of a thing?
Exactly. So he took his engineer brain and turned it into, um, how can I apply this to the garden? And so he really is the one that's taken off in managing the garden. And you will know because everything's in perfect rows and very
Oh,
well
yes.
organized. And I'm out there with the hedge trimmer, like, yeah, making a big mess. So,
More power to the two of you because so my husband is the perfect row gardener.
yeah.
And we finally realized, okay, we have to divide and conquer. You get this garden and I get that garden. And so then I can be wild over here and he can be really organized. That's how we managed. But you guys are like, you're still in that 300 square foot doing it together, right?
Yep. And he makes it super efficient and everything grows vertically and horizontally. And we're teaching the
Wow.
neighbors about how to grow. We live kind of in a food desert. We're right on the edge of
Right.
East Oakland.
Right.
And so we're teaching the neighbors that plants have age and certain things aren't ready to eat yet. And you have to wait until this season for that plant because at the grocery store, you can get tomatoes any time of the year.
We are
But in your
so,
garden,
we're
you don't. Go ahead. Sorry.
so disconnected. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just got excited about what we're saying. We're so disconnected in our modern society from food being from life, from a plant, from like the connection. And
Totally.
so, I had a similar experience. I had the same Trader Joe's bag that I used to bring vegetables home from the vegetable garden that I also go to Trader Joe's and buy produce. And the young woman checking me out looked in the bag and said, oh, it's dirty. You're going to put your food in this? And I was just like, oh,
Oh, yes.
yeah. Yeah, food comes from dirt, usually.
Yep. Yep. Totally. And that's kind of what we've been working with here is we're the little local neighbors. And during the pandemic, it gave us an opportunity to talk to our neighbors because we were out there having our quality time together outdoors the best we can,
Right.
gardening away. And the neighbors would ask, oh, well, how do you do this? And how do you do that? And what
Yeah.
plants? I even made a little pamphlet. It's
Uh-huh.
almost like we're recruiting people into our little vegetable cult. Um,
Yeah.
here's the local shops that you could buy these products from, and here's the
Right.
seed companies we recommend that you can order from. And I was
Right.
giving out pamphlets to people because one neighbor didn't have a phone to take a
Oh,
picture of the product because she
yeah.
doesn't use a cell phone, which is amazing.
Yeah.
um, so it's been really nice conversation with our neighbors and a way of getting to know new people and having something neutral to talk about that wasn't the pandemic. um,
Oh, right, right. So on the list, we're going to notice a few of the verbs that you've just mentioned.
okay, yes.
You spend time with trees and other plants,
Yes,
a lot of
absolutely.
time, and with animals. I'd like to talk to you about bees, but let's just hold off on that for a moment.
Okay.
You're also building a community. So there
Yes.
you are. You're by the very simple act of growing food in your front yard and then being there in your front yard when globally we've all come out of this really incredible time of lockdown. And so what does that mean in terms of what you can
Mhm.
and can't do, where you can do it, where you can't do it? So you're out in this 300 square foot patch of land where your husband has engineered vertical, horizontal, up, down, everywhere. And people are fascinated and also interested and hungry. Like we're all hungry. We're all hungry for real
Mhm.
food,
Mhm.
whether or
Mhm.
not we're physically hungry. We're hungry for real food. And so then you're putting pamphlets together and having conversations. So
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
building community, you're acting, you're being together, you're developing awareness, yours and others.
Yeah.
Lots of peace verbs in a garden.
Yes. The garden
Yeah.
really has become a place of peace verbs, but also a place for peace. And one of the other items I saw that you checked in there was making a meal from scratch. And
Yes. And so
so
you really you give new meaning to that word because
from the dirt, from the
from
seed.
yeah, can you tell us more about because I love Facebook and I love that you and I are friends like locally. I could actually drive to your house and like ring your doorbell. But I also see all your well, not all of them, but as many as possible, your vegetable garden photos and photos of meals that you put together. So can you tell
Mm.
us a little bit about that? So like you're growing, so you're learning seasonality for yourself. When is something ready to eat? When is it not? But then what's it like in terms of the amount of work and the organization that is involved in harvesting and eating and even putting food by? Can you tell us more about all of that?
Yes, totally. At first, eventually we want to have a bigger space. We've been working on buying our own space, but you know how that story goes.
Sure. Especially in this real estate market.
Exactly. So it's actually been kind of good that we only have as much space as we have, because Noah is so efficient and he likes to grow as effectively as possible. So ultimately, we get to share with our neighbors, we get to share with our friends, and I am pickling, canning, making sauces and freezing them. Like he says that he'll grow it and then I cook it, and I'm just like, so much to cook.
Right. But that's a good, I mean, in terms of trying something that goes back to our roots, right? Like making your own food, it is a huge amount of work. And so that you can share that labor, you can have it organized into you do this and I do that, is very practical.
He's the best sauce maker though. So usually he makes the tomato sauces and pasta sauces with the eggplants and squash and tomatoes when we get a big crop in. And so then we'll take those and we'll freeze them and then vacuum seal them. And then we have pasta dinner down the road and thank our past selves for helping out our current selves by making delicious sauce.
Yes. And I actually would add time travel to the list of peace verbs in so many different contexts and so many different ways. And yet, so let's just take that for a moment. Thanking our past selves, our current self thanking our past self. Can you apply that to life as well? So can you think of like moments where Jenjen of a younger self did something, tried something, accomplished something, worked through something that now current Jenjen is getting to appreciate?
Totally. I do this practice often. It helps steer maybe where I want to go. So if I'm talking to current self about a fork in the road, which way I want to go, I really try to set myself up for success. And I try to look at the long-term rollout of those actions. And I think I joke that I monetize my neuroses in that way because I'm also a stage manager. And so looking at now and then looking at how that's going to fix or resolve or deal with or create challenge for later is like constantly in my brain, which makes
spatially too. Spatially. And then you're also like, and I'm dealing with that person and their personality and that person and their personality. So you're doing this for yourself in your own life, but you're also using your logical brain. You said you studied economy, right?
Yes. Managerial economics with Abby, actually, our other dance friend. And then business in general.
Business. Okay. So you have a very practical education, all those little synapses in your brain that we're forming in college, very practical. And so now that we're talking about time travel in terms of recognizing where you are in a moment of time and thinking about choices, you said a fork in the road. So there's like, you could do this or you could do that. And then setting yourself up for success is probably an intention, but also maybe a set of thinking things through. So like, okay, if we go that way, what would that be like? What are the different components that come in here? What if we went that way? What would that be like? So are you imagining different futures and then figuring out which one to commit to?
Yes, and imagining them in a way that still leaves it open-ended. So you can kind of see if you pull the levers going this direction, it's going to lead you here. But I had to learn not to get really set on a final outcome and to be open to starting down the path and seeing where it would go. Because otherwise you can kind of set yourself up for upset if it doesn't turn out exactly the way you want. And I think in my youth, I'd done that plenty of times, as many of us do. But like the matter of originally I wanted to do exercise science or business. Which of the two did I want to do? I'll decide when I get to college. And then I went the business, like art history design route. And that, I wasn't sure where it would go, but that ended up being the right track for me. And then things started opening up along the way. So
even though you are an athlete and you've kept that element in your life. And so it was like you could have gone in that direction, but you looped it back in anyhow. Like you went in the other direction and then looped it back in.
And then I
So,
magically avoided all of the cadaver labs because I just like couldn't handle the biology and I was so scared of it. I was like, nope, this is not the major for me. I can't do it. I'm out.
yeah, I would have had a similar moment in time. Yeah, that would have been really rough to. So good job. Good job navigating that choice.
Thank you.
Wow. So let's see here. We've been talking about finding and following your own path. And this is one of the things that I have just kind of like watched Jenjen in awe and wonder. Like just been like, you are very much a mentor to me. You're younger than me, and yet I found you to be wiser in so many ways. And so, I was coming into Kinetic Arts Center watching Jenjen. You were getting married around that time. Like this was almost 10 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago. You're getting married around that time. So I was watching you and your husband find your own path, like the kind of relationship you were setting up for yourselves, the vows that you were writing. You got married at Burning Man, and I actually do want to hear about burning as a peace verb. I think this is still a part of your life, but yeah, do you want to tell us about any of that? Like finding, there's so many ways I've watched you find your own path. Like you wrestled in high school. There's not a lot of young women that do that. So what's it been like, Jen? What's that
It's an
like?
adventure. I I think curiosity could be maybe another action piece word. I don't know if it's already in there.
So be curious. Be
Yeah, be
curious.
curious has been kind of a mantra, motto, practice, way of being I've really tried to embrace. And even in hard times or scary times or challenging times, or angry times, when you get upset about something, okay, how can I be curious about the situation? And so that has
Oh.
led me to a lot of things I maybe didn't think I would end up at. And so, circling back to what you were saying, yes, we got married at Burning Man. I actually met Noah on his first night of his first burn. Hit on him, which I don't usually do, and away we go. And then 2 years later, I proposed to him, and luckily he said yes. And then 2 years after that, we got married. And last Friday was our 9th wedding anniversary.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
thank you very much. And we still like each other against all the mathematical odds. He's actually driving back from Reno and Burning Man right now, and I got back the night before last. So I'm very tan. If you,
And
you can see on a
also,
podcast, but
like you're probably feeling like, oh, I can do this Bay Area heat. I was just in Reno, right? Like,
yeah, it's crazy.
we're
It's
in the
more
middle of a
humid
heat wave.
here, so it's a different scenario there. But here
Yeah,
we have refuge. There it was
you're on the playa,
it was
right?
not. It was challenging. It was very challenging.
So
Um,
I wanna like before we move too far on, let's remember to circle back to, because I like to see how piece verbs combine. You were talking about be angry, and in that moment of being angry, also be curious. So let's talk about that later. But now that we're on the subject of Noah and Burning Man, what is Burning Man, and how is Burning Man important to you? How does it feed your soul? How does it inform your life? Like it mattered enough to get married there.
yeah.
What's important about Burning Man?
Whew, well, that's a little fresh since I haven't even done the laundry yet. So this is a great question, and a little tender too, actually. Um, in thinking about it, it's kind of the most brutal and beautiful place that you could go. It's like anything's possible, and then you constantly have the elements just like zapping you, be it the wind or the heat, or sometimes even cold, which hasn't really been a problem in the last couple years. But we're out there in this creative, very conscious community. You're with, your group of campmates, which in our case is very consciously selected. There was 45 of us this year, and the place is huge. It's like a challenge between limits and limitlessness. The space is huge. The it's hard to find people. You don't have cell service, and so you're kind of getting back to your roots of like roughing it. But then we've
Yeah.
done it enough times, and we've gotten ways around being clever and working as a team to make it less challenging. So we design community type kitchen space, or we design a
Right.
power supply, or we design dwellings that work better for that space. And so it's like this idea of collective creativity, collective consciousness, if you will. And then that allows space for like big creative art or big adventures or big laughs, or I really go for the art and the people. And the music is fun for me, but not what I really go to chase.
Mm-hmm.
I'll hear a lot of people who hear Burning Man talk about, oh, you can do lots of drugs in the deserts and see all the best, electronic music. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people do that. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, that's their jam. Some people go and do sunrise yoga every day and run a half marathon, which is
So it's
also.
like it's really open ended. So you're out in the desert. So Burning Man, it started in San Francisco on a beach, but then it
Mhm.
got, I guess, exported inland to Nevada, which is one state over from California, and Nevada is desert.
Mhm.
And so you're out on what is interestingly called a playa, but there's no water. It's not
Yeah.
actually a beach with water. It's
Yeah.
just like flat, sand, dry, hot, but expansive space. And so you're saying like no cell reception. Can I even imagine? Like I go on camping trips with cell reception. Like I don't
Mhm.
even know. Like talk about time travel. That would be back in 1980 something. So you're
Yeah.
out there, and you go with an intentionally selected group of people,
Mhm.
and there's different draws, there's different scenes. Like it's somehow, as human beings, you create organization, and there's
Totally.
organization for different experiences, and yet they're somehow all coexisting. So there's the people that go off for the psychedelic drug and music experience, there's the people that go for the sunrise yoga experience, there's the people that go for the community kitchen experience, and you're saying you get drawn to art and people.
Yeah.
So there's a huge connection to, as far as I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the whole Silicon Valley wealth and creativity. And then also some of filmmaking wealth and creativity that gets maybe tested or explored at Burning Man. So like
Mm.
what kind of structures, what kind of art, what kind of art is out there? What's happening out
Yeah.
there?
It's so interesting that it's everything from real simple conceptual art pieces that are out in the open playa and people ride their bike and trip upon, and or not trip upon, I guess they're tripping, they could be too, but like it could be something really small that you wouldn't see unless you just passed it by, or it could be something
Oh,
huge that
yeah,
becomes a very big community focused. There's always a temple every year
a
that is a
temple.
space to honor people who have passed
Wow.
or forgive ourselves, or it's a very
Wow.
somber, very intense place to go. And the rest of Burning Man is thumping and bumping and art and lights and all things are happening, and then you go to the temple and it's quiet and people are crying and people are holding each other and there's pictures of loved ones. um
So let's
so
let's stop for a moment on that as a piece verb.
mm,
So there's a piece noun there as a temple, right?
mm,
So it's a structure where quietude and stillness are allowed and encouraged, and also
mhm.
being together, but maybe also being alone in the middle of
Yeah.
being together.
Yeah.
And grieving, remembering,
Yeah.
honoring, all of these
Hmm.
piece verbs in this place.
Hmm. And it's really, I mean, just thinking of it and having seen it recently burn, they release it at the end of the week.
Ah,
And everyone,
burn.
so the week culminates in burning of the man.
Yeah.
Not that this podcast is a sales pitch for Burning Man in any way. This is just my
No, it's an
personal
exploration.
experience.
Yeah, it's an exploration of an important noun.
Yes, yes. So you build the city together, and then there's this culmination of the man burning, which is this kind of like New Year for a lot of people, and a release and a kind of starting over.
Right.
And it's a big party night, and it's very much like New Year's. People have fancy dress on, they bring
Wow.
out their champagne, and it's this very joyous event. And then the next night, the pendulum swings the other way, and we all go to the temple, and the temple is burned, and that
Oh,
is a
wow.
release of all of the grief and the sorrow and the elders and the lessons and the pets that people, some people honor their pets.
Right.
And with the pandemic and with COVID, more than ever, there was a gravity to it, a heaviness,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of respect and quiet at that
Hmm.
burn. And
Hmm.
and there's thousands of people sitting there watching this
Hmm.
art piece that was made predominantly by volunteers
Hmm.
go up in the huge flames, and the release, and then the dust devils come off, and you're seeing, some people see spirits, some people just see the release, and it's really powerful.
And
So,
there's cultures that I can think of that fire is a part of the release ceremony. So
mm-hmm,
in India
mm-hmm,
there's funeral
mm-hmm,
pyres and floating a burning body down the sacred
mm-hmm,
river to release.
mm-hmm,
And I think of in my own husband's culture uh, there's a New Year's tradition of creating fires and jumping over them
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
as a way to say, I shouldn't speak for this, but it's something about cleansing and, moving from the old to the new. And so
Yeah,
fire as an element, fire as an experience is a release, and it's a
yeah.
transmutation from one shape to another, chemically speaking, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
chemical reactions that change the physical makeup into something else. So thankfully, and I think not everybody at Burning Man is from California, but a rather large contingency. Thankfully, you can burn in Nevada on the playa rather than California, because we are having our own, you know,
Totally.
experience with global warming and fires in our
Mm-hmm.
lands, and yet there
Mm-hmm.
seems to be something important to honor in that as well, the release, the change, the
Yeah.
rebirth.
Yeah.
So
And
you're
and
coming
the
out of, go for,
go ahead,
please.
sorry. The other side of it I wanted to note for people who are unaware of what Burning Man's all about is that the a big one of the most major concepts I feel is it's about leaving no trace. And
Ah,
so we do all this wackadoodle, silly, somber, spiritual, whatever we do out there. And then the idea is to leave the place that we were as undamaged as possible. So all
wow.
the things that are burnt on top of like a burn platform, either made
Hmm.
of gravel or whatever. And then they scoop all of that up and take it away.
Wow.
Then any trash you bring, any food you bring, any gray water you create, all of that is taken out with you. And you're
Wow.
actually required to clean up your whole space, and you're judged, you're scored on how well you do it. And then your camp is
Interesting.
either permitted or not permitted to return the following year as that space.
So your 45 person creative, set, intentionally invited community of campers, of burners, uh, is evaluated by, do you leave a trace or not, and then
Correct.
you can or cannot come back next year.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a team of organizers like that put on the festival that are in charge of that, right? And
Yep.
maybe they get a permit from the state of Nevada or whichever county
Yes.
or
Yes. And it's BLM land. So
BLM,
it
right?
is major permits. The tickets to go are not cheap because
Mm-hmm.
we are paying for infrastructure. We're paying for um, teams that go by and do an additional sweep afterwards to clean
Mm-hmm.
everything up.
Mm-hmm.
So I really love that, unlike a lot of other music festivals I've worked or attended,
Mm-hmm.
or art festivals or yoga festival, any type of gathering, there's
Right.
always so much trash, and it's
It's
so
heartbreaking.
hard. And so this one, there's still a lot of trash, but we are all personally responsible for making sure we don't damage the land, and that is a really special, important key thing in how that whole event works and why I think it's really special.
Yes. And so I have never been to Burning Man, and yet I am influenced and impacted in a positive way by the culture that comes back, right? So there's that leave no trace, which is as I was raised by backpackers, so that's a familiar, practice for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like how to poop in the woods. There's a book about it, like, um, but so that's not new, but the concepts of intentionally studying community, of being in ceremony together, of allowing exploration. So I watch you live a very exploratory life, from the sidelines, right? um, that is a joyful permission in a 1 week period of time that then expands possibilities in a way that all of you people that are there then can take back to the communities where you live the rest of the year,
Mm-hmm.
because when you experience something, it's there in your brain cells to be like, well, how could I bring that behavior or that beauty or that art into where I am right now? And so I'm sure that at Kinetic Arts Center, where I spent a good, I don't know, 6 or 7 wonderful years of my life, and I hope to return, that was imbued, right? Like that the Burning Man culture was very much brought back home to that space and culture. So can you give me a couple examples of that in actual, form of how you
Oh,
notice
yes.
yourself?
I think there's a lot to do with holding each other capable and accountable. So with we have two youth troops over at Kinetic, and those young adults are held capable and accountable. We will challenge them. They can speak up if they feel discomfort or upset around any part of the challenge we've given them, be it they physically need help learning a trick, or they creatively need help finding a costume or an idea, and then we help send them along and let them explore further without necessarily doing it for them. um, there's a lot of whimsy. I think whimsy is such a huge whimsy and play are
Yes.
such huge important concepts that
Peace nouns.
totally and we forget, or maybe we step further away from them as adults as we get rutted down these professional tracks, and our LinkedIn profile looks this way and our
Oh, that gosh
Facebook
darn
profile
LinkedIn
looks that
profile.
way.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and what we're required to wear at this job versus what we'd rather wear at the beach, and just these things of
Yeah.
how we flag our identities.
And how
And
we think of being appropriate, and
yes.
so Burning Man creates a container of allowance
Mm-hmm.
for appropriate behavior to be expanded, like
Mm-hmm.
that you can do and be so many more things there. And so then you can see how the world doesn't explode, like of people being creative and
Totally. You can wear a dress.
expressive.
I don't care what gender you are. Wear a
Right,
dress
right,
anytime you want.
right. And
Are
so
you going
then
to get a
you
sunburn? Okay, throw on a shawl. Like what's practical?
what's practical, but then just like how do you actually figure out how to move in Burning Man? How do you figure out how to be in a physical structure or out on, like, there's just so many emotional and practical experiments that happen there. And so then
Mm-hmm.
you're bringing that back. And so you mentioned accountability, and on the list are be accountable and hold accountable. So there's that dance between those two, and you're then teaching young people to do and be both of these things, or to hold you accountable, that then you're also asking them to be accountable,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
in the context of whimsy and play, and also super super hardcore effort and work, because to
Yeah.
be in circus it's an extremely physical art form, and you will grow muscles that maybe have never been like
Yeah.
awoke in your body, right? I burst through clothing, like,
Yeah,
unfortunately I
your
bought
amazing back.
I bought expensive clothing before joining Kinetic Arts Center, and then I had to give most of it away, or yeah, anyhow, I became too big. Um,
Which
so
is
all that being,
wonderful.
yeah, it was not there right now, but anyhow, um, so all that being said, there's this interesting interplay between whimsy and play and
Mm-hmm.
accountability and
Mm-hmm.
work that are coming back from the playa to your workspace.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you could go to work at Kinetic Arts Center, and if you wanted to wear something that buttoned down, and had a collar, you could.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember people showing up in bloomers. There were definitely a share of fishnets for, fun and practical reasons. Like, it also expanded what does it mean to be professional in that whimsy and play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so Jenjen, thinking of your career, and um, yeah, actually, before we go there, I wanted to invite you to go back to your finding your own path, finding and following your own path, and how moments of anger invite moments of curiosity. Can you give us a couple examples of that, or an example of that?
Ooh, how moments of anger find curiosity. Well, I think the most appropriate way to jump into that for myself is to give credit to my dear friend who was actually kind of a guide went through our marriage preparedness process.
Hmm.
This wonderful man named Eric Newton who used to do marriage and family law. And then he started
And
this.
sorry to interrupt
Yes?
you, because I'm going to be circling back with Eric, because I interviewed him for this podcast in 2017.
Did you
Those,
really?
yes, those
Ah!
interviews haven't been aired yet, but he said yes. Yes, come down to my podcast studio where
Yes.
we can. Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us more about Eric and yeah.
Well, I can just gush all day about Eric as being just a wonderful human, and also what I call a funstigator,
A
an
funstigator.
instigator of fun and joy. And he's an amazing human. And he taught me one of my biggest life lessons that I use constantly is curious before furious. And
Oh, okay. So
did he
these
talk
are
about
adjectives.
this as well? I don't want to steal his fire.
But to be like, you can tell that I really enjoyed eighth grade grammar. But we're talking about an adjective now. Or,
yes.
Curious before furious. Okay, so something happens. So he is someone who's helping you get ready to be married. And so any of us who have been in a long-term relationship, married or not, know that there are moments of furiousness. Like, how could you be so you're saying there's actually a piece verb of pause in there too. You didn't say it, but you implied it.
I hear that. Yes. There's a pause there and a reflection around, instead of going with the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, why'd you leave all the dishes in the sink?
Right.
When I get home, you said you'd have them done, or something very silly and benign, something that someone could get frustrated over.
And yet those cohabitation moments are for real. Like those are like yeah.
Totally. So I get home, say the dishes are in the sink, and Noah said he would have done them for me by the time I got home, and they weren't done. Now I'm mad because he didn't do what he said he was going to do. Well, can I be curious about it? I wonder what happened. Did he forget? Come to find out, there was a fire in the little shed around the corner, and Noah ran down the street and was calling the fire department. This actually happened right before we left town. There was a shed that caught on fire because of the heat or something. We don't know what it was. Yeah. And Noah's running around the corner. The neighbors are out. They're calling the fire department. They're trying to put it out. We're telling all the other neighbors to be aware of their backyards. And so, of course, he didn't have time to do the dishes. He was off being a local,
hero,
superhero in the neighborhood.
And so, aren't you grateful that you had that coming up in you, right? Like, I could be angry about this. Wait, pause.
Yeah.
Be curious and then ask from that place of curiosity, and then you find out, and then I'm thinking you're also proud, grateful,
totally
in awe, yeah.
And there's more community connection that happened. We knocked on the door and saw our neighbor we hadn't seen in a while. Like
your block of houses didn't burn down. Like there's just so much, right?
Totally.
You came together. So I'm sure that the fact that you have met some of those neighbors in your front yard made it easier for Noah to, feel comfortable, like responding right away. And I'm sure that is all coming back in a circle.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great example. So you learned that from Eric. So was that a moment of learning with your heart? Like, because there's on the list, learn with your heart, learn with your mind. And I know you do both of those things. Was that a heart learning moment?
I think it's definitely a heart moment, because if I'm going to be going into union with this other person, how can we get connected? How can we start learning to know in our hearts that their actions are genuine and that they have me in mind when they make choices, and their care for me is in their awareness when they make choices and paths they go down. And learning with your heart can be hard sometimes, because maybe I'm not as included as I wanted, or maybe it's not the path that I would prefer, but maybe there's some truth there that fits me well, or maybe there isn't, and they need to have that as something they do as their own activity. And
I think that the two of you have been really amazing in that particular regard of just saying, we're two individuals. And so you started telling us about this process that you go through yourself, I'm at a fork in the road.
Yeah.
And how do I imagine this way and that way? But then when you're two of you, like there's two individuals having forks in the road. And so then giving each other space, taking up space, those are also peace actions, for letting there be both, and understanding that there's a dance there, and there's a process, and it's not always comfortable. And yet if it's done with thoughtfulness and a pause, because being thoughtful requires a pause, right? You can't if you're just going to do what feels good without thinking about it, then the chances are pretty good that you're going to step on each other, like in any relationship, right? And so you set out with reflection, with you brought in someone who was able to mentor you, right? So you didn't just jump the two of you into this decision together. You actually called in help, and you looked at things together before you came together. So Eric was doing that for you. Was he a podcaster at that point in time, an attorney at that point in time? Where was he in his journey?
Where was he in his journey? I think he was in a real time of personal transition, which in its own beauty complemented our time of transition. And he was working with another woman, and I cannot remember her name off the top of my head. She was like a couples counselor and therapist. And so he brought together, they looked at what the common themes or trends in relationships, I don't like the word failing, but in relationships deciding to separate or discontinue.
Right.
And so they went through all of those common themes together and found some big trends. And so in bringing up and talking about those trends ahead of time before the actual marriage happened, you could talk about some hard stuff that maybe are deal breakers.
Deal breakers, right.
So
before you stumble upon them.
Yes.
And so you can decide for yourself, the two of you, like, a lot of people think this is a deal breaker. Is it a deal breaker for us?
Yeah.
A lot of people think this is a deal breaker. Is this a deal breaker for us? So that you can just get a sense of, and you were in your early 30s when you got married. Is that about right?
Yes. Math. Yes, I was.
Okay, math.
I was like, how old was I? I don't even know.
And, we all mature at different rates and levels, but I got married at age 27. And I was right around the brink of where I was old enough to handle that kind of a conversation, and so we didn't do a whole lot of that, like at that point in time. And there's some beauty to just saying one doesn't have to rush into marriage. One can become an adult first and figure things out and have one's feet on the ground a little bit more. And I think there's more allowance for that in our society now than maybe in our parents' generation.
I think so. Agreed. And we as a couple knew that we weren't interested or weren't going to go down the path of having kids ourselves. And so that also allowed some different timing and some different flexibilities than someone who really biologically my body wants to have this done by this date or whatever.
Yes. Oh my gosh, for sure.
So that's one of the big deal breakers. Oh, who wants to have kids in this combination of people? Both of you? None of you? One of you? Let's talk about that.
Right.
Does death till death do you part? Is that how you define marriage? Or no, if you hate each other, or are you going to make yourself stay together? What were some other ones? Hygiene and sleeping patterns. Like, those are crazy things that if you don't live together, you might not realize that is something that is a collision.
Oh my goodness, that is so interesting and funny. And us being in the pandemic, our definition of hygiene has shifted.
Sure.
Like how many showers we take now versus how many we used to. But then sleeping patterns, like I go to bed really early, my husband goes to bed really late, and in our particular home, that's actually good because we're both introverts, and so we each have like the time of the day that we're by ourselves, right? But if we were living in a smaller home, that might be really challenging, right?
Yeah.
And so you actually looked at that.
Yeah.
So what a gift that Eric and his partner, his business partner at that point in time had. And I think so he was coming from being like a family attorney, right? Like seeing people through a lot of divorces and seeing people through a lot of prenuptial agreements. And then partnering with a counselor and then seeing look at the patterns so that we can then help people avoid those painful moments, which is almost like Eric saying, I'd like to not have a job.
Yeah, because he's that generous and kind. Like, I'd rather help you through not having to deal with this. Totally.
Because the dissolution of a household is hugely traumatic if one doesn't see it coming and one feels blindsided and train wrecked by these common points, right? These common points of consideration.
Yeah. It was, and if you talk to Eric again, please let's credit the wonderful woman who was the other partner in that course we took, because my brain is just blanking, but she was incredible. And gave us a lot of insight and lessons on her own union and how she managed it. And yeah, I'm so grateful. I tell everyone about this course I took. It was so cool. And I don't think that they actually ended up doing it on a larger scale,
Hmm.
which was their choice or however it came to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I found it to be so beneficial. So I really hope there's other things out there, or at least people having the foresight to think about those questions before they get to the County of Nevada marriage signature office.
Right, right. And so like so finding your own path started with a pause. And it
Yeah.
started with learning and it started with exploring before committing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see, you know how Facebook does this, where it shows you memories, like, remember this?
Mm-hmm.
And so every once in a while I see your wedding dress pop up or wedding photos. And I'm like, that is one of the prettiest wedding dresses I remember seeing. And there was
Thank you.
color involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I, and I think that there was a picture of you holding Noah, which speaks to your circus arms, right?
Totally.
Um,
And
and
Whimsy. He
and
let me scoop
Whimsy,
him up. It was
he let
so
you
funny.
scoop him up, and so you know, you've given yourself permission to find your own path, like as an individual and now also as a partner. And but I want to go back a little bit to Jenjen as an individual in high school, right?
Mm,
Because high school has got to be one of the most challenging times for any human being.
totally.
And how we're so judgmental of each other, of ourselves, so I mean our hormones in our brains are just wreaking havoc. And you allowed yourself in high school to cross a threshold, which I think is getting easier and easier for women or people that are born as women to do, which is you
Mm,
said, I'm going to be strong.
mm,
I'm going to let myself have muscle mass.
mm,
I am going to let myself protect myself and I'm going to let myself fight.
mm,
So you joined the wrestling team in high school, Southern California. Um, you know, I see a lot of other high school photos from Southern California friends, football, cheerleaders, right?
yeah,
So
totally.
can you tell us about like so were you at how old were you first of all? What year were you that you joined the wrestling team?
Well, to backtrack a little bit, I was a cheerleader for a couple years,
Was that fun?
because it was great. We were more of a dance team than like a
Uh-huh.
big stunt team. And so I did Pop Warner cheerleading for a little bit. And then I did high school cheerleading for a couple years. Pop Warner is like junior high.
Uh-huh.
And then high
Okay.
school cheerleading for a couple years. And it was song and dance, and we did routines and had our little outfits. And I worked at a yogurt shop to pay for my outfit, and
Fun.
learning how to engage with the world, how to the value of money,
Hmm.
how to manage time, how to manage interpersonal relationships with
Mm-hmm.
peers and coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun and great. And the whole time I was also on the swim team,
Hmm.
uh, and because cheerleading and swim, they somehow didn't overlap so much that I couldn't do both, or I was just crazy and I did everything at that point, which is not unfamiliar story to now. Um, so I was on the swim team and the cheerleading team. And then right around my sophomore, junior year, maybe junior, senior year, Title IX was in the process of passing.
Did
And
that happen that oh my gosh, I did not realize that it was that late in history.
I think it
So
was in the
Title IX.
90s, early mid 90s.
Oh my goodness. So for those of you that don't live in the United States of America, Title IX was about making sure that school athletic programs were equally funded for women as they were or for girls as they were for boys.
Correct.
I
Correct.
thought that happened before I was in high school. It actually happened when I was in college.
We'll
Wow.
have to fact check.
Wow. Okay.
Sure, but or maybe I didn't feel the impact of the permission, or our school. Also, I lived in Orange County. Um,
Yeah, which is a
it's a little
conservative
yeah.
conservative place
There was
with
a girl on the football team
there
when I
was.
came in, so it might have
Wow.
been a little earlier, it might have been later 80s, but there was definitely no one in the league who was in the district who was on the wrestling team that was a female identified person.
Right.
Um, and there were some people on the water polo team
Mm-hmm.
who were women, but they were on the men's water polo
Mm-hmm.
team, because there wasn't a female women's sanctioned water polo team
So
yet.
there was a little bit of like because in the finding and following one's own path, it's also about carving a path for others to follow. So there were some
Mm,
young women that had carved a path, but in different sports. So you already knew, like, oh, she's on the football team. Oh, she's on the
right,
water polo team. Okay.
right. And it just wasn't that common. And I think I was doing like scorekeeping. I did scorekeeping for wrestling one year, and I just really appreciated the sport
Hmm.
and how dedicated the people were.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the guy who would have become the captain of the wrestling team, and he was a friend of mine, and so that made it easier to know that I would get respect going in there. And then
Okay.
the coach,
Yeah.
Coach Palczewski, really big guy, heavyweight wrestler. There was some talk about I wanted to join the wrestling team. The head coach, athletic coach, wasn't so sure about that. And Coach Palczewski went to him and said, "We got to. She's got to be on the team. That's
Title
just
nine.
that's how it's going to be."
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know how begrudgingly or not the head coach,
Mm.
may he rest in peace. He passed away a number of years ago.
Mm.
Um, how begrudgingly he let that happen because
Mm-hmm.
he was also the football coach and a very traditional male archetype.
Yeah.
It happened, and I wasn't terrible. I wasn't great. I didn't lose all the time. I won some of the time, but I did get respect, and I did get some of the best work out of my life, and I did make a lot of dear friendships
Wow.
doing
How
that.
cool. How
And then
cool.
the cheerleaders came and cheered for me, which was hilarious.
Oh, wow. So I that's a really heart-filled story. And
Mm,
so, because you could expect it to be like it was really hard. I had to bust through barriers, but no, you had a
mm,
friend that welcomed you. You knew you had a
mm,
safe place in that person's,
mm,
that friendship that you had. You had a coach that said, "We're going to do this," and
mm,
and then you wrestled, and
mm.
you were met with respect. And so,
Yep.
as someone who I have forays into athleticism, but I will never call myself an athlete. And there's sometimes like if I'm playing frisbee, I think of myself as the perennial beginner from, when I was 19 years old to now I'm 50. Like if I will never be great, but there's something about allowing yourself to do it anyway, which
Mm,
is
mm.
really important. So like allowance, the verb of
Yeah.
allowing,
Yeah.
and also being humble. Like, so, you won some, you didn't. So
Yeah.
you're not like, I have to go in there and be the best. Like, no, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to
I
do
got
it.
my butt kicked, but I got really strong and I learned a lot, and really, really good people. My brother ended up doing it later, and that was sweet because he was Jenny Wong's brother. I think he got
Wow.
picked on more because he was my baby brother.
And so
Um,
that's so you all of you,
mm,
high school wrestling teammates and opponents, you and your brother are all pushing gently on the boundaries of gender rigidity,
mm-hmm,
right?
for
And so you're
sure.
like, I can imagine, not only was it a really interesting moment when you were in the ring for the first time, but imagine all of those boys that lined up against you and had to wrestle you.
Yeah, it was hard for some of them for sure.
Yeah, to be like, okay, I'm going to be forceful and try to beat my opponent. Like, I get that, right? I'm going to be forceful and try to beat my opponent, but she's a girl. Is that
Mm-hmm,
okay? Can I do
mm-hmm,
that? Can
mm-hmm,
I allow myself to do that?
mm-hmm,
What if she beats me?
mm-hmm.
And so, wow, that's a lot of my stomach is reacting to that. There's a lot there. There's a lot there that goes back centuries that you
Yeah.
were uh, you're bringing it into a ceremonial intentional space because that's what sports is, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially something like Greco-Roman wrestling. It's so old school and it's got all these layers of history to
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, and I think my Persian husband would tell you that it was invented in Iran.
Yeah, yeah. I would have,
But
the Greeks want to take credit for everything, right?
yeah. So wrestling, which is an
Yeah,
ancient sport, which is about like, well, it's in a circle, and well, I don't know much about it, but you
totally.
can imagine or even tell us a little bit. But so you're in this, and you're having these experiences, and then um so then you graduate high school, you're moving into college. How did Jenjen, who decided to go for wrestling, support Jenjen, who's now at UC Davis?
Mm. Well, to backtick, one other victory we had in high school was there were only a few girls on the water polo team
Yeah.
in the junior year as well, which I was also on. And so then we took the senior year and actually created the first women's water polo team, out
Wow.
of
So you had
and
enough
recruited.
people.
So we had enough people to make our own team. Thanks again to Title IX, we had our own team. And so water polo and the I was a big fish in a little pond. I was one of the best water polo players on our little teeny tiny team in our little teeny tiny district. So I took that and I went to UC Davis with the intention to play water polo. Come to find out, UC Davis women's water polo team is one of the best women's water polo teams in the country.
Oh
And
wow! So you were big
focus
fish
on
in a little
humility.
pond.
Yeah, I got my butt kicked again repeatedly.
Oh wow.
It ended up being ultimately too much to manage. Going off to college, learning how to live on my own for the first time, working, balancing a rigorous school schedule and an extremely challenging athletic training schedule.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I ended up not wanting to be a red shirt and just constantly getting my butt kicked.
Right.
And then riding my bike home in the cold. So I ultimately opted out of water polo in college, took a few years off, and I went to rowing in college. Because I like really impossibly hard sports.
I guess so.
Apparently.
And allowing yourself upper body strength, which again is
Yes.
getting at to be in your female body and to enjoy it fully means to allow it to be strong.
Mm-hmm. And then the strength that came from those sports, the endurance, the way of working through hardships with people and challenges and all those things, that led me to dance. And that ultimately was a better fit for who I was growing to become, which was less focused on competition and more focused on creativity, less aggressive and more curious and creative. Yeah. And so the strength that I gathered through all of these other sports and how to deal with being on teams with people really helped as I got into the dance world.
Wow.
And that's where I met Abby.
That's right. That's right.
It's a full circle.
Full circle. I just want to make sure that Farhad's okay because he's not home yet. Sorry to interrupt.
No. Noah's driving home from Reno too.
Oh yeah.
It's very exciting. Our dear ones.
Yeah. Farhad just had COVID and he's feeling a little bit better, but it was like wiped him out.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
And
he's better now?
I mean, enough to be like out there in the world doing his thing. So,
Great.
Yeah, so you mentioned Abby, and I am definitely going to be inviting her to be a guest on this podcast.
Yay.
I haven't talked to her in a million years, it feels like, or at least since at least between the babies, who are not babies anymore.
Oh my gosh, they're wonderful little small humans.
They're
incredible. I got to see them recently, a couple months ago, and we went on a swim in the pool and just had the most lovely time learning about these little people as their own individual human selves, because they're not babies anymore, and
oh my goodness,
they have their own personalities and their own likes, and one's really into Pokemon and the other's really into other games, and so it was just so much fun to see her and to see Tony, and they're really thriving in their long distance home.
Yeah.
So I hope you get a chance to chat with her soon, because
I hope so too. Yeah, so to come back to your adventure in dance, so I can relate to that, like that wanting to be athletic and wanting to be in some kind of reciprocity or movement with other people, but without it being a competition. And so to dance, to do modern dance with an ensemble is very much about that, right? Because you are in contact with each other, you're in sync with each other, you're timing with each other, so you're practicing right timing. You're working, you're paying attention, you're creating a space with your bodies, you're holding a space for yourself and your audience. There's so many piece verbs that come into that. So did you start the dance troupe in college, or was that something that grew out of it once you graduated?
I actually have a funny story about that. I had done a couple of the student dance pieces. I think I was taking a dance class, and then there was the student program at the end where some of the more senior dance students had to create a piece and show it off. And I think Abby was like, yeah, you should audition. And so I did the group audition. I got in and did did a couple, one or 2 seasons of dance projects. And then I was working at a cafe, and this choreographer who's in the master's program comes in and he's like, oh, I've seen you dance. I'm looking for people who want to be in my master thesis. If you're interested, let me know. And I was like, oh, yes, totally. I'd love to do it. And he's like, well, let me send you some information, see if you're interested. I was like, no, I'm sure it'll be great. Well, yeah, hang on. You should check it out. Maybe come to rehearsal. Okay. So I make him his cappuccino or whatever. He goes off. My friend smacks me with a towel. She goes, you idiot. That's the naked guy. And I said, what? The naked guy? And come to find out, it's this wonderful human named Eric Coopers, who is another big leader in who I've turned into Jenjen. Another Eric. It's true, actually, spelled with a different way, but yes. And come to find out, he's doing his master thesis on mortality, and it's called the Undressed Project.
Oh,
and
my goodness!
It is dancers performing nude.
Yeah.
But like the most unsexy kind of naked dance, because people say, "Oh, you're a naked dancer, like burlesque something." No. Well, we were there, like shaking.
So, I mean, that gets also. So we're breaking down. I see you allow yourself to not be a stereotype, right? And so you're embodied. You are a soul with a pulse, with breath, with flesh, and you are saying a body is for everything. A body is not just for sex or for objectification, for being like a commodity that people drink through their eyes. That's not the only thing a body is for. And so your dance mentor, or the Eric that brought you into this dance troupe, is exploring the connection of ourselves to ourselves, our physical selves, by allowing people to be actually unhidden.
Yeah,
right.
And exactly, we were as raw as you could be, even to the point of, being encouraged not to wear makeup. And I actually at the time was really scared of not wearing makeup because I didn't have very perfect skin, and so I had to figure out if the part that made me feel more naked was not hiding some of my acne scars. And
wow, so you were pushing the boundaries of letting go of being perfect and right, which is also on the list of peace verbs.
And everyone was. We had in that group, we had people with very, very large bodies. We had people with very slim bodies. We had people with amputated limbs. We had people in wheelchairs.
Wow.
We had people.
Can you imagine the courage? Well, I think you can imagine because you were dancing with them. The courage of allowing yourself to be seen as a person in a wheelchair, a person without a limb.
Yeah.
No clothing.
No clothing. And
wow.
and a lot of the movement we did was we were shaking and jiggling and letting people see that we had fat, and slouching and letting people see we had rolls, and rolling on the ground, and then someone's back fart would happen because we're sweaty, and like you'd hit the ground, the sound would be made. And it was all of these, like, it was really beautiful to see and to accept and to encourage others to allow existence of that. Like we are all dressed all perfectly when we go to the theater. Yeah. We have our purse, we have our matching everything, we have our perfectly coiffed hair, and because here we are out there just raw.
But for a moment there, because I want to talk a little bit about the theater aspect of this. You talk about getting dressed up to go to the theater, which is a way of honoring the performers, right? So like you're saying, I'm going to put effort into my physical presence to honor your gift and your physicality of showing me a window into humanity, which, I don't know, you kind of seem to tie back to the Grecians and the Romans, Jenjen, because like theater in the round, or the live theater experience is what you're speaking to here. So oh my gosh, you were an undergrad. Well, I have to tell you, actually, not nearly as exploratory, although similarly naked, when I was a junior in college.
Yeah.
And I was in the cooperative, the dining cooperative. I was on the Naked Friday dinner crew cleanup.
Awesome.
Isn't it liberating? Yeah, because again, it was not about sex or sexuality. It was about doing the dishes together.
Yeah.
But it was Friday, and we'd rather be doing something else on Fridays. We're like, let's spice it up and just not wear our clothes. We had aprons on.
Amazing.
Because of,
hygiene.
Yes, it was a kitchen. Anyhow, so I have like a similar, like I was 19 and I did that crazy naked thing, but yours was so much more depth, maturity, gravity, and emotional content than washing the dishes and listening to 8 tracks.
I mean, maybe it's all kind of connected, right? It's feeling free and safe and able to communicate with others. And there's a little performative aspect of it. You're getting a task done together, you know. Maybe you
Yeah.
don't have a full audience. You know, maybe you're not outright talking about death the whole time, which was some of our pieces were.
Wow.
Um, but it was definitely an adventure.
Yes, yes.
Adventure.
And
We're still
so,
doing some of that work now, which is really great. We ended up going on a couple small tours. Um, and we would have people leave the theater just in their own tears and catharsis and appreciation. And I feel like we really made an impact for people, and it was really really potent for them.
yeah.
And we, as much as we could, would let that impact soak into ourselves as well. And I was
So
pretty
there's
young
a
too.
there's a interaction between you and the audience. There's an energetic exchange there. So
Hmm. Hmm.
you're seeing people crying. You're seeing people take
Hmm.
this in, and so then you are then being impacted by them, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly.
Wow, wow.
Exactly. It was really hi, husband came home. Um, it was really a special time, and it really, I give credit to those performative days, to how I learned to be in my body, how I learned to be brave, how I learned to. It was less about sexuality and sex and more about confidence.
Yeah.
And being an Asian American woman, there's a lot of fetishization of that, having lots of muscles that can be looked at as either less feminine or fetishized in its own way.
Right,
And
right.
so I just learned how to literally step in the light, totally raw, and not be scared.
And so you're creating boundaries. You're finding and holding healthy boundaries in that as
Mm-hmm.
well. Because
Mm-hmm.
to say this is my body and I will express myself
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how you in the world, whoever you is, may interpret or want me to express
Mm-hmm.
myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so you are being you. And the permission that you're giving yourself is like I was saying, like I see you as a mentor, I'm a fan, is like,
Mm-hmm.
I am watching you as I'm sure so many young people also have been, right? So you had this experience as a young person. You're then graduating from college and going off into the adult world. And so I know that you have also been a member of a dance troupe and that you've also been a body paint model. And I don't know
Yeah.
if you're still doing that, but just to say, I'm body as art, as a vehicle for art, and
Yeah. I'm
body as a canvas. Wow, right?
gonna mute myself while I cough real quick. Sorry about that.
So
I
no,
swallowed
no
wrong.
worries, no worries. So
Body as a
so
canvas. Yep.
yeah, and allowing so many creative adventures and expressions where you've been a canvas for other people's artwork in a way that it's been a collective, a collaborative, finished product, and then there's photography that comes in. And anyhow, so that's been really fascinating and
Hmm.
amazing. Are you still in that world?
I don't have time to do it as much anymore. That's for sure. Um, but I do think that whole, I like the through line that you're helping me realize of my little life adventure, and coming into my own confidence and bravery, or just not caring what other people thinkness, whatever
Yes.
that action piece word is. Um,
And yet, of course, we always do still care.
of
And yet,
course, of
I
course.
think you're actually just making space for yourself to care how you feel and to care about that
Yeah.
more.
Yes. Yes. And to be curious, to say, I don't know, let's make some of this art and let's see how it goes. And some of the
Right.
paintings were really lovely, and some of the paintings were maybe not my favorite, but they did the job of whatever that artist was working to do. Um, or some of them were just good creative starts on the next piece we are going to do together and have it more refined. So we did body paint modeling for car ads, for like coffee table books, for
I remember a few of
competitions.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I haven't done that in a number of years, mostly because I got more into the business administration, stage management, more theatrical side of the backstage elements.
So I want to say welcome home, Noah. I hope that it's okay to like. Is it good to just keep going on the interview for a little bit
Yeah,
more?
yeah. Let's
Okay.
go ahead and finish up these things, and then I'll help him. I think he's going to be dragging in some stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah. And so I think Farhad actually just came on at exactly the same time. Yeah. So he's
good,
he's probably unpacking sweaty vegetables right now because I brought him home
perfect,
and they're like all still sweating in a bucket. Um,
perfect.
so anyhow, so you leave college. You've had this incredible experience of being part of the Naked Guys dance master thesis, and then you're now in the professional world and you're out there and there's being a body paint model, and at some point you find your way to Kinetic Arts Center,
Mm-hmm.
and you were there from the beginning, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you helped them grow. So Jaren and Victoria, you helped them grow this budding project in
Mm-hmm.
an old warehouse. I think it was, were they doing metal plating there, paintwork?
I think good memory. I think originally they were doing metal plating, and then it was empty for a long time. They totally refurbished it, and then it was this empty kind of warehouse space over in West Oakland that could have been subdivided but wasn't. Sat empty for a long time, and finally we came in, and it was the right place for us to start this circus and fitness training facility because it had enough open ceiling space for us to put rigging in,
Steel beams.
steel beams, and open ceiling height, which
Yeah,
is kind of hard. There's not a lot of motivation to build like that unless you
right,
have a reason. And because this had like crane bars in it from the
right.
steel planing, we knew we could rig off of those I beams.
Very safe
Really
rigging.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jaren was really great about that.
Right. So you
So,
so you you brought in some financial management skill set to the artist and the so like Jaren creative director, right?
mm-hmm,
Victoria business manager,
mm-hmm.
and then
She
you
was
helped.
I did like the operations and the daily, so all of the staffing, the staff booking, the class programming, the everything from payroll to website to all the administrative management stuff was where I came in, which was great because I really didn't. I had always loved circus, but I'd never really done circus. Um, and then I had some of the business administrative management stuff that I could apply. And so Victoria did all the hard stuff with the insurance and really her and Jaren owning the business. And then I came in as like the little third finger there to help support the day to day and really work and foster relationships with the teachers and their scheduling and then for the longest time I was the front desk person too,
Yeah.
while I did my work. And then I got to meet all of the people who were curious about, well, what is this place and what can I do here? And
Yeah.
I got a kid bouncing off the walls. Can they be walls?
Yeah, so from little ones to big ones, and
Mm-hmm.
so helping people explore their strength, really, because
Yeah.
if you're going to do
Or to find it.
circus,
Yeah.
to find it.
Yeah.
And when I came to the gym, I found you because I was in a deep, like, accelerated healing process at that point in my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was going to CODA meetings, so it's like Codependence Anonymous, which is a 12-step
Mm-hmm.
program where you don't have to have an addiction to show up. You just it's like you can go just to get healthy in your relationships. And
Yeah.
on the door at the Congregational Church that Sunday night, which was in downtown Oakland, where I would go for those meetings, there was a poster for Anyone Can Dance, and
Mm-hmm.
it was actually you and Abby's dance troupe were participating in that event, which was exactly the words that I needed to hear because I knew that part of my healing had to include dance.
Yeah.
And it was
Beautiful.
going back to me like age 4. I was doing some time traveling there to go back to age 4 and sort things out, rebuild and reparent myself. And there
Yeah.
was this invitation to dance. And so then I call like, hello, is it really true that anybody can dance? And there you were, the other side of so you built the website. So like I see the
Mm.
telephone number, I look to see what website's attached to it. And wow, modern dance classes for adults, circus classes, and then you were all of the difference of getting me through that door, because I didn't think I could do it. And I had no upper body mass. I had an athletic history of long distance bicycle riding in my youth. And so my legs, I was very confident in my leg strength, but I didn't have anything up here. No meat.
And then you were busting out of your shirt.
Oh my gosh.
You were so strong.
I
Boy,
was.
did you. So
oh my
good.
gosh.
Climbing rope, so hard.
And to the point that I had that experience in my early 40s of crossing that threshold of like, okay, I don't look feminine anymore. Right? Because there's this myth that women don't build muscle mass. Yes, we do, actually. And yet I had this moment where my joy of experiencing my body being upside down and inside out on a rope was much vaster than my concern about looking a certain way. And so I had this very clear threshold moment where that I crossed over that, and then my world opened up, and of course my world opened up because your world had already opened up so many years before.
I love that. Oh, that's so special. That makes my heart happy.
Yeah, no, it's the truth. It's amazing. You definitely opened the door to me changing my life, which is how I think anyone changes a life. It's actually always an inside job, but there are helpers and there are welcomers, right? And so you welcomed me into that adventure. So you were at Kinetic Arts Center how many years?
10. I left after 10 solid years, actually. It's pretty wild.
And I think there was some changes happening for them in other ways, right? Like they were having changeovers of management and some shifts in their business.
They had some more of that happen after that as well. I think, going from a real startup to something that's really going to be around for a long time, there's a lot of transition that happens there.
Yes.
And we don't all necessarily grow in the same directions. And so I think for me, I'd been there a long time and I was ready to start seeing which other ways I could grow. And I didn't want to own a circus school of my own. Okay. And I was still really interested in circus, and I was getting interested in production and event planning. And I'd been doing some weddings on the side. My sister-in-law.
And vaudeville too, right? So you had already been a stage manager, like parallel at the same time with your work at Kinetic.
So for the last 3 years at Kinetic, I was also, part-timing with Vaudeville Society, which is another circus company in the Bay Area. And they are more of a performance and event type company. They don't necessarily have a physical space where they teach classes.
Right.
And
yet a lot of the performers were also the teachers.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a small community.
Not performing all the time. You need to have some other additional income.
Right.
So I was moonlighting for them and doing things like the Edwardian Ball, and we'd done Soiled Dove, which was a dinner theater show, and other shows around town, other big parties and events. And, it was like, an event or two per month. And it was a great part-time job where I was learning a lot about production. And then I was feeling it was more time to start going like freelance and start doing more freelance work and kind of piecing together and having more variety in what I was doing. And so it kind of came time for me to say, okay, well, Kinetic, this has been awesome. It's a huge foundation for circus and knowledge and just my love of all of that world. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go freelance. And so in March 18th of 2020 was my last day at Kinetic.
What?
And then the whole world.
Oh my! I mean, oh wow! So you didn't know that a week later you'd be in lockdown. So you quit a job, and then oh my gosh, Jenjen.
Thank goodness I had 3 months of W-2 work on that payroll, because I'd worked for them for 10 years and been paying into work. My work, unemployment and all that stuff forever. Yeah. So luckily I was able to get through the pandemic and trying to make things happen, doing every bid or event proposal we could that was pandemic appropriate, and getting shut down all the time by the city because things were just moving so fast
nobody knew what to do.
So it was a really hard time for event planners.
And freelance artists.
Yep. Yep. So I started doing
performers.
some digital stuff and virtual events and spiffed up my game on some of that, but that's not where my joy is.
But it was a
And
survival skill set
yeah,
that you built up in that time period.
yeah, yeah. And it was cool to learn all sorts of new stuff. The thank goodness for the internet and
For
YouTube
sure.
and all the other things that my husband's a tech guy and would help me out with
Right,
dealing with some
right. So
technology. So
you can help each other.
yeah. So
And
then it became time for things to start opening back up again, and Seven Fingers was hiring for their new show that's in downtown or in North Beach in San
in
Francisco.
a really famous space. What space is
Yes,
it that that your
Cl-
performers are in?
Club Fugazi, which is the former Beach Blanket Babylon Theater,
Yeah.
which their brilliance, they closed December 31st, 2019, before, 3 months before the shutdown happened too. And they went out with a bang. They sold out shows for 6 months straight because they said they were closing well in advance and
Yeah.
they're ready to retire and
Yeah.
super busy and joyous, but also, sad because some people found it as a mainstay in the city and it really was.
Right.
And then they closed, and then that theater was empty for a number of years. And then Seven Fingers was looking for a space and found Club Fugazi. And
So Seven
so
Fingers is a circus troupe.
Seven Fingers is a circus troupe organization. They're one of the largest in the world. They're actually based out of Montreal, Canada. And the show that we have here, which is called Dear San Francisco, is the first US home for the Seven Fingers.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
which is really special because two of the Seven Fingers that started the company are actually Bay Area natives. And so having a home here and those directors come home and see their families and
Yeah.
their friends and colleagues that they were raised with is really special and a long-term goal for them. So.
And so there's a pain tribute. There's an appreciation. There's a celebration, and there's a storytelling in what you're doing with this performance, and also that has echoes of Beach Blanket Babylon now too, doesn't it? Because it's a love letter to the city of San Francisco, and wasn't Beach Blanket Babylon also in its own like drag queen kind of a way the same sort of a thing?
Yeah, it was the longest running musical parody in the US. And so it was a lot of panto kind of call and response. There was a lot of comedy, there was a lot of satire, there's a lot of political edge to it,
Right.
which allowed their show to evolve. And so people kept coming back to it because you couldn't even make up some of the stuff that was happening in politics by the time they were
Sure.
closing.
Yeah.
So we do pay homage to them in a number of ways. We have a little sing along in there, and we do, and the show is a love letter to the city. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of reference there and appreciation for it for sure.
And so there's storytelling in circus, and it's a very three-dimensional sort of storytelling. How do you write a love letter through circus? What is that even like? Like what are the acts, and how do they show that love to the city?
There's a lot of reference to history. So the earthquake, the weather, the hills, all things that people who are either tourists or longtime San Francisco natives can relate to. There's a lot of little jokes and jabs in there that people who have lived in the Bay a long time can laugh at. One of them is like, I'm going down to, there's traffic by the ballpark. AT&T? SBC? Oh yeah, Oracle. What's it called
Yeah,
now?
yeah, yeah.
And
Right.
the locals will get a good laugh out of that. And some of the people who are new to town are like, wait, what? I'm confused. And then lots of the thing that Seven Fingers does differently than say Cirque du Soleil is they're really about the person and the story. And so they don't hide or mask who that artist is with grand makeup and
Right.
huge elaborate costumes.
Right.
There's lovely costumes and they do their own makeup, but it's mostly a little more pedestrian looking, it's much more personable. And so you really see the person.
So there's a little bit of the street performer element there, but on stage, right? Because there's a lot in San Francisco. There's also a very healthy street performer culture and acrobatics happening, and the kind
And
of
it's a small space. It only fits 330 people. You're literally 8 feet away from these people or closer at times. And so you really get to see you're seeing them sweat. You're seeing them wink at each other when someone kind of makes a little flub. You're seeing them give each other a high five when someone's done something pretty extra fun.
So there's that
real
playfulness, that like the veil between the audience and the performers is poked through every once in a while.
Yes, and the artists are so genuine and so sweet and such lovely humans, and the directors do such a very specific job of creating that little symphony that they are on stage, that you can't not see the sweetness. And I'm just so honored to be there and work with these, just they're young beautiful humans. It's really fun.
And so there you are, you're stage managing. So we were talking earlier, so we'll bring it back to this. Jenjen at a fork in the road. Jenjen time traveling forward as a way to understand a decision point that you're in right now. How does that how does that play out in your job, in your role that you embody at this point in time? What kind of decisions are there that you make as a stage manager?
Oh, well, let's see. Stage manager is kind of the shorter version of the title. The full title is artist and performance manager. So a lot of what I deal with is everything from housing to health and wellness to outside gigs. And then on show days, I'm actually running the time and the stage management portion of things. The artists really do a lot of the changeover themselves. So they're very active during the performance, and I'm doing less stage hand stuff and more reports and documentation and helping make sure the bigger picture is flowing with the management. So the fork in the road there is all that administrative business work and then all the event and performative work coming together. And I feel a very special understanding of what the artist's needs are.
Because you are one too.
Because I have performed and have experienced that side of things. And I know when tenderness might be a better fit than scolding someone for making a mess or whatever the thing is, right?
Right. And so you're holding that container of humanness for people and understanding that humans need to be managed when they're on a team, whatever work team that is. And I'm going to be interviewing one of my colleagues. We work for an engineering firm. You have to learn how to work with each other, right? You have to learn how to hold space for each other. You have to learn how to motivate and correct. And sometimes that means the hug. And sometimes that means the talking to. Like in any work environment, right? Whether it's performers or engineers.
and then on the other side of things, you still have to make sure the budget is working and the ticket sales and marketing team has what they need.
Absolutely.
And so all of that
the
experience
finances.
Dealing with Kinetic, who is technically a smaller organization, but still has all the similar topics and challenges: ticket sales, marketing, websites, getting butts in seats, getting people to attend classes, making sure you're up on the safety and health protocols. Right. All of that, even whatever size the smaller business is, all of that translates to the other businesses, and needs to be managed. And learning about San Francisco legal laws and codes versus Oakland, and how that translates, and visas and things like that. It's all kind of culminated to where I am now, which is pretty special.
Wow. So I know that you have a husband that just came back from a really long drive to help unpack. And so I'd like to, wrap up this conversation. But I'd like to celebrate also, let's see if you can help me find the verb for this, Jenjen, because it's about growing. It's actually, maybe it is to grow. So you've got, we didn't talk about bees. Maybe that's another time. Unless you want to say
we could do a whole separate podcast on
Okay,
bees.
So Jenjen is a beekeeper. We'll just put that out there, and maybe there'll be part 2 about beekeeping at some point. Awesome. But you're growing, so not only are you learning how to urban homestead and growing your garden together, that you're growing your neighborhood and your community together, but you're also realizing in your own sense of right timing, of practicing right timing, when the journey is complete with the current experience. And so to understand, like there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And so that you notice, no one kicked you out of your job. You were probably sorely missed when you left, right? But you knew, I need to grow, and you went out on a very, I don't know, was it scary? Was it exciting? Was it curious? Are we bringing you back to that
Yes, it
innate
was all
curiosity?
of that. It was this, I don't know, let's figure it outness with some framework and structure and some, savings and licensing and things like that. There's steps you have to take to do it.
So there's balance. There's balance.
There's some balance, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you jump out on that limb, and then life throws the whole globe this curveball of like, now everyone is staying home. And so like, obviously you made it through because you're well and you're here and we're talking. And then you found your way, then you saw an opportunity, like you were reading job postings, I'm thinking, and you and this new organization are now coming out of the pandemic together. And you're now building on your previous growth, right? Because there was you applied for the job at Kinetics, you grew, and then you busted out of those seams, and now you're growing again, and you still you're using what you learned before, and you're building out from there.
Yeah, agreed. The whole process with each of these companies, I really have been thinking about the term growth edge, and how much joy can be when you're at your next achievement, and then also how like challenging or scary or a little unnerving or cautious you can be because things are unknown. And so constantly I'm just getting my brain stretched and pulled, and I'm learning new things and trying to find more resource sources, especially during pandemic when everything's also funky around that. Just growth edge the whole time.
Wow.
Constantly stretching and pulling.
Wow.
Good and hard.
Yeah, good and hard. So there's work. There's a piece verb in there. Growing and working are very related to each other, and balancing.
Yeah.
Taking risks, but also creating the safety net. Like, so I see that you talked about, you did both of those things. Not one without the other, both of those things.
And luckily I had a partner who works in the digital world, so he was able to remain working during the pandemic, which gave a lot more space and comfort to trust and breathe and allow some time to let the fruits develop instead of panicking and just picking up any job I could because I had to, which unfortunately a lot of people had to do. I was very, very fortunate that he was like, don't just get any job. Take a class, do the thing. What's going to get you to the next thing that you really want to do? What's going to help you be where you want to be?
So giving each other that cushion, giving each other that time, that breathing space, that incubation period, that, like, as a gardener, you understand that there's also winter. Like, a tomato plant doesn't live like all the time, right? Yeah. And so human beings also need that quiet and inward contemplative waiting space.
I think that's like just the perfect way of putting that is sometimes there's winter.
Yeah, sometimes there's winter. And to allow for that. So, wow, Jenjen. What a great exploration. No, this has been so much fun. Like, not only do I get to catch up with you, but then just all of these piece verb explorations that we get to share with other people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate your work for this too.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.